You wrote beautifully, and I quote, regardless of what may be influencing an individual's shift in identity, the question to ask is, what is my gender dysphoria telling me? So this brings to mind the current conversion therapy debates, which ultimately I think restrict access just to good therapeutic help for persons who are wanting to say, hey, I just want good talk therapy to talk about my conflict, whether that be same-sex attraction or gender dysphoria. So I really like the way you put this, because in other words, I was hearing our experience of same-sex attraction or gender dysphoria has meaning that needs mining therapeutically. And we should let people sort of have avenues. We should be pro-choice in this area, right? Therapeutic choice for a person saying, I just need some help. So can you speak to a little bit into that?
Yeah, I mean, what a good phrase, meaning that needs mining. I mean, that hits the nail on the head. Unfortunately, so many therapists are afraid to speak into this because I think it's more than a dozen states right now. You can lose your license to practice if you're not just pushing gender affirmative care to see transitioning is the only solution to someone who has gender dysphoria. And so, yeah, what's needed is to really where's this coming from? Let's talk through this thing because sometimes it's not even gender dysphoria. I remember a college guy coming up to me after a talk, and he's like, "Yeah, I've really struggled with gender dysphoria since I was 7 or 8 years old." Da, da, da. And I said, "Well, tell me a little bit." And we started talking. I'm like, "You don't have gender dysphoria." And he's like, "What?" No, he's like, "No, I do." And I said, "No." I said, "Let me just try to play this out." I'm going to guess that when you were young, you felt drawn towards women, a bit mystified by them. You wanted to unravel the mystery of womanhood and unite to her. And, maybe you started wearing some undergarments that belonged to your sister, your mom, or whatever in private when no one was around. And there was a kind of a thrill. There was a sense of identification with womanhood, and an excitement of how risque this was. And when it went away, you tried it again. And by the time you got into adolescence and some sexual development, there turned to be some, more sexualization of this. And I said, what this is called is not gender dysphoria, it's autogynephilia, which is the love of oneself as a woman, of seeing yourself, of presenting yourself as a woman. It's not that you think you're one, but rather that you're aroused by the thought of yourself as one. And the guy's jaw just dropped. And he said, you just described my entire life in less than 5 minutes. He said, I always felt like the gender dysphoria label didn't fit on me because I never thought that I was a girl. I was just so perplexed by myself that I would even want to present as one in private. And in the milieu of this whole cultural transgender moment, I just kind of got swept up in the current and thought that that was my identity. And so very often an entire story gets replaced with a label. And so let's peel the label, let's do a little mining, and then oftentimes you can get to the roots of what's really going on and then treat it with appropriate care.
In our work, we deal with a lot of people who are struggling on various ends of the spectrum of sexual brokenness. I come out of a background of SSA, and I mean, I can't say enough how important the therapeutic was for me, and just kind of understanding what was the psychogenesis of my experience of SSA. And I mean, let's kind of go into that. I know that the catechism says, like the psychogenesis of homosexuality is largely unknown, but I don't think the catechism is saying then therefore you shouldn't go and search out your own psychogenesis of SSA. I think it's just staying in its lane. It's not a psychological document, but it's saying we're not going to sort of broad categorize everyone's experience of SSA, but go and mine the meaning of what you're experiencing.
And I think there's a lot of pushback against this idea because many intuit the idea that, well, if you're looking into the origins of this, then you're just saying it was caused by some trauma or some bad relationship with my dad or this or that. And so you're invalidating my core identity by trying to treat it like there's some cause that may be this way, as opposed to, no, like, well, all of us are influenced by our environment, regardless of who you're sexually attracted to. And that influences our decisions and things like that. So the more we learn about ourselves, the better. I remember one saint was speaking into the topic of homosexuality, and he questioned a man, and he said, what is it that you see or you seek in that man that you do not find in yourself? And it's like, whoa, there was a one psychologist who said in the realm of human sexuality, the exotic becomes the erotic, meaning we're drawn to the otherness of the other. And if a person feels, in a sense, alienated from his own sense of masculinity, then manhood is the other to which he feels drawn. And so he's seeing in another something that he lacks in himself that's alien to himself because we're drawn towards the other. And so looking like, okay, is there a masculinity that I long to find in myself that I don't, that I feel would complete me by uniting to this person? Like, I mean, these are heavy questions. These are not easy to ask because, I mean, the level of self honesty and reflection that it takes to be like, whoa, yeah, there's some hurt there, and let's just address the hurt for the sake of addressing the hurt, not for the sake of, okay, if you just go to counseling for 6 weeks, your attraction is going to change and you're going to think girls are more pretty than boys. Like, no, let's be very careful not to make false promises that if you just do some digging here, everything's going to change. Sometimes it does, but we don't want to make those false promises because I think it'll lead to despair a lot of the time. Like, wait a minute, I did my therapy and the attractions aren't going away. Well, we can't promise from the outset that they will. But then we also need to be careful not to take a cookie cutter approach that, like, oh, you experience this, must be that. I think the origins of human attraction are unique as the person themselves. And so we've got to take it on a very individualistic, perspective.
I really appreciate like the exotic becoming erotic. I do think that's Joseph Nicolosi, just a great thinker in regards to male homosexuality in general. I do think that there is such an allergy to these thinkers, these seminal thinkers. I think they're sort of branded as coercive and abusive, but when you read them, they're just really thoughtful and really kind. There is something about extending kindness towards oneself. I read that through someone like a Joe Nicolosi. It's not a judgment. You made that really beautiful distinction in your writing. It's not about sort of condemning oneself. It's about showing compassion towards oneself in areas of disappointment or trauma or family of origin wounds, whatever the case might be.
Yeah, and I think that's why a lot of people want to kind of throw away the baby with the bathwater when it comes to Nicolosi's approach. It's like, oh, you just want to strap me in a chair and electrocute me anytime I have a thought about same-sex attractions and make that it's going to go away. Like, it's like, no, that's
it's
really
like, who's doing that?
Yeah, like we're not doing. And so I think it's resisted precisely because it's so effective. And it's just like, whoa, what if this is spot on? What if this guy's intuitions regarding the origins of human attraction are accurate? Whoa, that reframes everything. Let's just villainize the guy, make a caricature of it, and make it just looks like he's some homophobic, wants to torture you to make your attractions go away. Because maybe there was some 1% of therapists who are total nut jobs trying to do that, that would just, that it's either that or just gay pride parades. So take your pick. It's like, that's a bit of a false dichotomy.